I'm going to start with asking you, Luis. You are owning a 10% segment in SMB sellers in Brazil, roughly 1.6 million out of 16 million sellers, crossing the $500 million in revenues red line. And you are operating in one of the most interesting markets from the financial perspective in the world, Brazil. And yet today you announced, by the way, congratulations, that you are launching an instant payment product in the US, which is a big market and also probably the most competitive market in the world today. So the question for you would be, what was the thinking behind choosing US as the first international market? And how did you think about the timing? Why now was the right time to do that?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, talk to you. Great panel. So we are launching in United States a product called Gene.com that basically brings payment acceptance for micro sellers, instant payments, and AI. US is 10 times bigger than Brazil, huge market. In Brazil, we are approaching like 10% of the market share in the segment for SME sellers. And we do believe that we can get like super nice market share in the United States as well, because in US, they are in the beginning of instant payments. They have different kinds of instant payment networks like Zelle, FedNow, but we are coming to US, arriving in US, offering instant payments for the micro sellers. Sellers from 1 to 5 employees that can sell immediately, receive money in real time, and pay for that stuff. Also, there is an AI element, AI agent we call Jim, that helps the seller to manage their finance. And for this, especially for these micro sellers, instant payments, it's really, really important because when you speed up the cash flow for these micro sellers, they sell more, they grow their business, and they're more health. And that's the problem we are fixing for them, how they can sell more and speed up their cash flow. There's another element to this strategy, that's inflation. It's the first time in a couple of decades that US is getting high inflation. And in Brazil, we have learned a lot about how to deal with this inflation. So, and we know that as you speed up cash flow and you pay in real time, you can avoid some effects of inflation. And especially for micro sellers, small entrepreneurs, inflation hurts a lot. Not for big customers, but for super small customers, inflation is a big problem. And I think the final element is Brazil. I'd say Brazil is 10 years ahead in payments than United States. I think our central bank won a couple of different prizes. So Brazil has the best central bank in the planet. We have Pix, Open Finance. Now we have blockchain network with Drex. So I'm pretty proud about the work that Roberto Campos and the whole central bank team did in Brazil, putting us as on the forefront of the financial revolution, digitalization, inclusion. So we know that we have so much to teach other countries. And now we are launching our product, Gene.com, in the United States. I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I think fintech in general is one of those markets where much more innovations, like you said, are happening in Brazil and Latin America. And there's a lot that LATAM founders can bring to the US and global markets. Before we turn to Sebastian, one more question for you. In terms of the customer base, a common perception would be to think that there are very different profiles of customers in Brazil versus the US. Are they different or are there similarities? And how would your playbook be different between dealing with customers in this segment in Brazil versus the US?
That's an awesome question. I think micro entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs, or small stores, they have exactly the same problem everywhere. They need faster money. They need to sell more. They need more customers. And when you fix this problem about how, when you start to move money fast, I joke that we want to move money at the speed of light. You really help these small sellers and they grow their store more. So these small sellers, they have exactly the same problem here in Brazil The small seller, the American small sellers, they have exactly the same problems, and everywhere in the planet, every country, small sellers, they need money faster and they need to accept more payments, digital payments. So we fix that big time for them. They pay us. They're pretty happy when we fix this big problem. And I would say that these small sellers also they're pretty well connected. So one of our playbooks about go-to-market, digital, social media, viral videos. We have the third biggest account in TikTok in Brazil right now. Our NPS in the industry is the highest NPS for payments in Brazil, 79 right now. Number one in Reclame Aqui in Brazil. So we cracked the code about how to serve and go to market for SME sellers in Brazil, and now bringing the same for SME sellers in the United States.
Sebastián, you launched Kushki in 2017 out of Ecuador. And in roughly 5 years, you scaled operations and products and business across 5 markets in Spanish-speaking Latin America. What was your approach towards opening new markets, and how did you think about going after Spanish-speaking LATAM versus, for example, focusing on Brazil or one specific Spanish-speaking market in LATAM like Mexico?
And first of all, good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It's great to be here. And Olga, the initial answer to your question is we didn't know. We started the company, we started Kushki very much with the idea of being a payments API that enabled online payments in subserved markets in Latin America. But as I think has happened to a lot of entrepreneurs who operate in Latin America, we discovered that to build the company, you have to build the company underneath the company. In other words, the underlying ecosystem and infrastructure to enable online payments and final payments applications to consumers and businesses really didn't exist, not only in Ecuador, but in most of Spanish-speaking Latin America. And I actually argue that even in Brazil, which is certainly the most sophisticated payments market of the region, it's only been so very recently in that sense. And so the underlying payments rails and infrastructure, in order for payments to function correctly, it has not been standardized at all in these markets. And so we began in Ecuador, picked Ecuador. Well, originally my co-founder and I are from there, but it happens to be a very interesting sandbox or laboratory market to really understand how to build those payment rails and then go to other markets to standardize them. And so every little market is actually its own special case in that sense. But what you find is that usually there's some hodgepodge of legacy banking infrastructure, banking monopolies or duopolies, regulators that may or may not have their own rails. And so what Kushki has done is to go into each of these markets and to find a way to standardize that interaction. Sometimes we do it by bolting onto existing rails in market. But in sort of the most recent years, our strategy has actually been to build them from scratch. And actually, when we think about payment rails, I think there's kind of two sides to the coin. One is the pure technology, right? So running on a modern stack, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but the largest mover electronically of money in the world is still the United States, and they run on a system that was literally coded in Fortran, and it's still the underlying pipes, right? So to give an extreme example, but you have sort of on one side of the coin this building the pure pipes and keeping them as low to the ground, meaning as close to the payment interaction as possible. But then the other side of that coin is actually what I call the financial stack, right? And that financial stack is the business models and the interaction between regulator, existing banking infrastructure, and then payments enablers, and getting that all to play well with each other. And initially in Latin America, in most places, that didn't exist because that was owned by a single entity, usually a collection of banks. But that started to change, and it's starting to look a lot more like developed markets, particularly the US and Europe. And Kushki, in effect, what we've become is basically the first multi-market non-bank acquirer in the region. And so when you use Kushki, you can process both card and APMs through our stack using our own licenses, our own financial risk, in other words. And that enables, well, we still work with merchants, but that enables merchants and distributors of payments sort of a much more compact, much more plug and play solution to actually go out into the market and do what they do best, which is either to sell to their customers or to distribute payments more broadly in that sense.
Talking about regulators, you guys are both operating in highly regulated markets globally. So, what's your approach towards dealing with regulators and just implementing this strategy of operating in a highly regulated market in your business development strategy and in your product development strategy, and how the founder should think about it?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially when you're fintech. It's really important to talk to regulators and build together with regulators. In Brazil, we have this privilege to be building together with the central bank. So the Brazilian central bank created a bunch of APIs, new regulations that fintech companies like CloudWalk can connect and build together. And it's pretty friendly. The Brazilian central bank, they want more competition. They want us, fintech companies, to create great products, to reduce price to the Brazilian citizen. So Brazilian citizen can have more access. It's not the same in every country. United States, a little bit different. We are working together with regulators in US as well to bring our product in US through bank partnerships who are super well regulated. But in Brazil, it's a different game. In Brazil, we're pretty close to the regulators and building together with the regulator. So that enables us to move faster. But I think the main piece of advice is, especially when you're in Brazil, starting a fintech, try to work together with regulators because they're there to help you and guide you most of the time. If you're doing great stuff for the Brazilian citizens, they're going to help you a lot.
Yeah, for us interacting with regulators, I mean, interacting with regulators in general is very complex, right? And when you think about us, we're currently in 5 markets. We'll probably be more in the not so distant future. But actually, our experience with regulators has actually been overall very, very positive, right? I think regulators in all of the markets that we're in, kind of what Luis was alluding to, has this very vested interest in how do we create better technology and better infrastructure for the country? How do we offer products that have more competitive pricing and better unit economics for small businesses, for the citizen at the end of the day who's consuming a payment, whether that's online or offline? And so I think most of our interactions with regulators have actually been very much in a spirit of collaboration. The best regulators, I think, approach fintech such as ourselves, or really across any vertical or market, right? And they're curious and they ask questions. And I think for us at least, this kind of sense that there's like this battle with the regulator has not really been the case. In some cases, Kushki has helped the regulator design certain new regulations or laws to enable technologies and business models that didn't exist before, to now be able to bring those kind of interactions in market. And so yes, in general, it's been quite positive in that sense. But having a team to interact with so many regulators, like in our case, is it's fun. It certainly is.
I love your bullet about collaborative approach. That Silicon Valley motto, go big, go fast and break things, doesn't necessarily work in regulated market. Last one before we wrap up. For you, if you look back in this 5 years of expansion experience, what were the most challenging moments for building business across multiple markets, and how did you overcome them? And then, Luis, for you would be, what are the anticipated challenges that you're going to see by entering such a big market like the US? So,
I think the biggest challenge in general is still the go-to-market itself, right? So on the one hand, uh, sort of working with incumbent systems or even incumbents in terms of competitors and trying to build this sense that there's much more to be done by creating a much larger pie, even if the percentage of the slice that you have it is smaller, that can be complex because in Latam culturally we're used to institutions and business models where very few players concentrate and own all of it in that sense. And so that go to market in terms of building the ecosystem such that it's more receptive towards growth and not just pure ownership. And then on the other side, actually educating the users, right? Educating merchants, educating end users in digital payments. That is always a challenge in that sense, and getting them to bolt that onto the way that their businesses function and also be a challenge, right? So there's very much an educational component, which I think in the go-to-market of our products has been one of the biggest challenges that we've had to face.
Yeah, this is really well said. And building on top of that, I think the biggest challenge right now is also the biggest opportunity. Right now, like most of the companies are building this new era of AI. So large language models, how can you improve your efficiency using AI? And I think the challenge for us is how can we get AI, how can we work with AI and be so efficient that our peers, they don't have any chance to compete with us. So we have been using AI for a while, and we do know that this technology pretty soon is going to enable companies to be insanely efficient. Right now, our revenue per employee is crossing like $1 million per employee. And we do know that in the next 2-3 years, especially with AGI and the improving of large language models, this number is going to grow a lot because AI is creating together with humans that are going to change the landscape about how to do go-to-market, how to build great products, how to do digital distribution, how to do education for customers. And I think it's a huge challenge, but also awesome opportunity for us builders to create this future with AI and payments.
It's all about reframing, right? How do you take the obstacle and turn it into an opportunity to build a business? Thank you so much, Sebastián and Luis. I'm really excited to watch you build global and regional leaders out of Latin America in the next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a
Olga.
pleasure. It's a pleasure.